Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York City Vibraphonist Behn Gillece. Over the course of our interview, he discussed how the playing of both Milt Jackson and Bobby Hutcherson were a huge influence on his playing. Originally from New Jersey, he picked up the vibes as a teenager and went with it. From there, he got his roots sewn in Philadelphia before moving on to New York City. Since 2006, he's been huge on the scene in New York and very active with plenty of jazz cats and at clubs like Smalls. He discussed his latest 2015 album, which is a great one called Mindset, along with his jazz journey up to this point in his life. And he talked about what might just be next. Please dig this interview, my friends.
Hey, thank you for taking a little time to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thanks for doing it.
Let me go ahead and start off here. I know you're very busy. You got a brand new album out. Give me an idea of what has been going on, kind of a snapshot of what's been going on with you lately.
Lately, I've been working with a quartet with vibes, guitar, bass, drums. And we just recorded over the weekend, actually, so that's going to be for my second album as leader with Positone. Yeah, other things that are going on. I did another album with them that came out last year that was very successful, Mindset. Yeah, it got good radio play. I think it came in like 50 on the charts for the year, so I was really surprised and happy about that. And that was with a quintet where I had Ken Fowler on saxophone, and I have a lot of collaborative projects with him on Positone as well. Yeah, other things I'm doing currently, I play around New York a lot, Philly, New Jersey, where I live, a lot of different places. And I also have a couple different bands I play with. I play in a group in Philly, Ensemble Novo, does a lot of Brazilian music. So I take a lot of inspiration from that genre, and it's pretty influential in the stuff I write. I've also have a couple other sideman things, some records coming out for Positone, one with Michael Dietz, great trombone player, Walt Weiskopf, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of a lot of things, but that's kind of sums up a few projects that I'm currently involved in. So,
right on. Well, and as you mentioned, Mindset has gone over really well on the radio and with critics. It's a great album. So, talk to me a little bit about the motivating forces that went into this album. What was it you were trying to say? What is it about this album? What went into this album?
I was just trying to, I guess, write for this instrumentation. A lot of the inspiration and mindset comes from some of the Bobby Hutcherson bands from the late 60s, early 70s. Like, I'm very influenced by his quintet stuff with Harold Land, and those albums that they made together are some of my favorites. I just think it's a beautiful sound. I think tenor and vibes is a great combination with rhythm section. So I think that was a lot of the thinking in the album, just a lot of stuff that was, a lot of tunes tested out on gigs at Smalls and Fat Cat, just trying to experiment with that instrumentation and come up with, different things for each tune, like, trying different, every composition to kind of have a different thing to it, sometimes unison lines with the tenor, or sometimes the vibraphone doing voicings, and I think it's one of the cool things about the vibes in that instrumentation is that I think the vibraphone can kind of live inside two different worlds. I think sometimes it could be a frontline instrument the way guys like Milt Jackson and Bobby Hutcherson played it, but you can also put it into the rhythm section. Like with four mallets, you can have voicings for the instrument, and so it can kind of be in the rhythm section at times, and that's the kind of stuff I like to mess around with musically, like when I'm writing and arranging compositions. I just want to see what moments the vibes can really shine, if they're doing a lead line or some voicings. Just try to figure that stuff out. It's a lot of fun and very interesting.
Talk to me a little bit about your roots. You grew up in New Jersey. Talk to me about how you got so interested in jazz. What was it about your childhood that got you there?
Well, I started playing music as a drummer I got into the drums. I wanted to be in a rock band with friends, and that's how I kind of got my start. But I got involved in my high school music program not too long after I started taking drum lessons. And it was a little accidental how I got involved in music in school, actually. I thought originally I was just signing up for a class. It was called instrumental music. It actually turned out the class was band class, and you had to be in the marching band, which I was not too keen on at the time. When I was told that I needed to show up to band or I was going to fail, and then I started to take it seriously, and I really got into it. It really helped open new avenues. I really got into concert band music and got into playing mallets, and I think that was kind of what opened it all up right there. And towards the end of high school, I really started specializing more on mallets, and so I went to college to study classical percussion. I went to Rowan University in South Jersey, and I played a lot of marimba music for a long time, concentrating mostly on that. But I did a little jazz vibraphone. Even from high school, I started to play around with it a little bit. And so I carried some of that to college with me. And when people had heard me, they said, "Oh, you should be a jazz major." So about halfway through my time at Rowan, I switched to a jazz degree playing vibes. By the time I graduated, I pretty much double majored in classical and jazz. But I was pretty much focused from that point afterwards on becoming a vibraphonist. And so that's kind of the short version of it all. I mean, there was a lot of different things that happened to get me to that point, but that was kind of the thing that got me into playing jazz, just, I guess, being around people in my program at Rowan. And then, from there they would go into Philly and say, "Oh, let's go hang out at Chris's." And so I would check people out, and that's how I started to network with people. And then when I went to grad school in 2006 at Purchase in New York, that's how I started to network with musicians in the New York area as well.
Very cool. So let me ask you this. You've mentioned Milt Jackson and Bobby Hutcherson several times. Was there an album that you listened to growing up that really kind of was a big spoke of light that kind of introduced you to jazz in a way that made you love it?
So that's an interesting question. I don't think there was any album in particular. And I guess my jazz listening history doesn't really go back that far because I got into music so late as a teenager. And by the time I really started checking out jazz recordings, I was already in my 20s. So, but that's when I made the switch when I was in college. And so I was hanging out with jazz major colleagues we used to go to well, they don't exist anymore, but there was this Tower Records in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, that was pretty close to our school. It's like right outside Philadelphia. And we used to go there and buy albums, and my friends would encourage me to buy all these Blue Note albums. So I really got into jazz listening, not really to many vibe stores. I mean, I was really into Milt a lot, but I remember being really into Joe Henderson and Hank Mobley and Dexter Gordon, a lot of tenor players, and a lot of classic Blue Note stuff. That was kind of really my introduction to listening to jazz, and kind of went for, more bebop guys after that, like Parker. I think that, somewhere along the line, I remember going in there to buy a bunch of Gary Burton albums, and the guy working at the counter said to me, "Do you play the vibes?" Because I was coming in there and buying all these vibe albums. And I said, "Yeah, I play vibes." He says, "Man, you should be listening to Bobby Hutcherson." So I said, "Oh, yeah, okay." And I bought a Bobby album. I bought like a best of the Blue Note years, I think it was called. It was some compilation. And it didn't really make any sense to me at the time. I didn't really understand it musically. I thought it was neat, but I wasn't that into it. I listened to it a couple times and, kind of put it away for a while. And then I clearly remember some years later, fast forward, maybe around 2007 or 8, when I was doing my first co-led album with Ken Fowler, we were hanging out at Smoke Jazz Club one night in New York, and David Hazeltine was there. And he was talking to us, and he says, "Have you guys checked out that stuff with Bobby Hutcherson and Harold Land?" And I said, "Yeah, I have listened to that stuff." He's like, "That's some great music, and you should really be checking that out." And even though I had checked it out, just him mentioning that made me think, oh, I should go back and listen to some of that stuff again. And I guess the separation from the last time I had listened to it, it was like a new experience at this point.
Yeah.
So it was really great to hear that. It really opened up new avenues. Sometimes I feel like that with listening to jazz. When you haven't heard something in a long time, your ears are always evolving. You're always evolving as a player. So when you revisit things, you tend to hear things differently when you come back.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is an interesting way of putting it. So after you got the music bug when you were a teenager, did you envision yourself becoming a professional musician, or were there other dreams that you had that you wanted to do in life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess, as soon as I got into music, I think I did want to become a professional. When I got my first taste of going out and playing gigs, it started to become obvious that I wanted to make it my career path. But I don't really think I had any idea that I'd be doing what I do now. I didn't have any visions of becoming a composer or anything like that. I wasn't really into writing. And so that was a big thing that I never envisioned from the beginning. And I actually really wanted to become a music teacher. I was very influenced by people around me when I was growing up. They said, "You should go to school for music education." And I really took that to heart. That's why I went to school in South Florida. I went to a really good teacher's college, and I think that's what I really wanted to do, and just play gigs. But I just think the deeper I got into it, I started to, especially getting into jazz and just hanging out with different musicians, I think people kind of said, "Oh, well, you should play, and you should perform, you should move to New York, you should do this, and that." And so I think that the people around me really helped that happen, more or less. It wasn't something I really envisioned in the beginning. If somebody had told me years ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have been very shocked. But for what it's worth, I feel like where I've gotten is by pure accident and coincidence,
So you got your master's degree from SUNY Purchase. What was it about the classroom that taught you? What did you learn about jazz in the classroom that's helped you in the real world?
Well, in the classroom, there's certain things you learn. I don't know. I don't really know how much you learn about the real world in the classroom, to be completely honest. I think that you go to school to learn how to play your instrument properly, to get the right properly, to get the right information. But I think the only way to learn about the real world is to be in the real world. When I was at Purchase, I actually lived in Yonkers for a couple of years because I thought it was a good in-between place between the city and where Purchase was. It was a good halfway point. And so I would go to my classes, and there were certain classes I really liked. I liked my lessons with David Hazeltine a lot while I was there, and I liked a couple other things about it. But on the whole, I was very eager to get outside the school and hang out at clubs. And so my first year when I was at Purchase, I was more dead set on just hanging out at Smalls and Smoke and Fat Cat and just watching people and learning that way.
So let me ask you this. Before you went to New York in 2006, you spent some quality time in Philly. What was it about Philadelphia that lured you in to kind of get you ready to go to New York?
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the great things about coming up in Philly were opportunities that I don't know if I would have had if I had, I always wonder how somebody breaks into a scene when they go right to New York, because I think that when I was in Philly, there's not as many people. It's smaller than New York. And I feel like at the time I was starting to play a lot in Philly, there wasn't a ton of piano players on the scene. So it gave me an opportunity to become a sideman and play vibes with a chordal instrument with a lot of different bands. So a lot of the gigs that I did, I wasn't necessarily leading, and I got a lot of opportunities to just play and learn that way. And I don't feel like it's quite that easy in New York. I feel like there's so many great piano players that when you work as a sideman in New York, at least for me, it's usually part of a larger ensemble where I'm playing like a horn player. Maybe I'm playing in the front line with a sax or a trumpet or something like that. And I think those opportunities are a little rare because it's a very large scene, and vibes don't work as a sideman a lot. So I think that Philly was a great place to really get my feet wet and be able to expand a little bit. And I still play down there quite a bit. I live in Jersey, in between both New York and Philly, so I'm constantly back and forth in between two scenes. It enables me to work, more than I would if I was just in one area, which is great actually. So
let me ask you this: what's it been like to work alongside Ken Fauser for years?
It's been great. I think that we have a friendship going back to when we were teenagers, and I used to play drums in a band. Then I think we kind of lost contact for a couple of years, and he went to University of Arts in Philly. I went to Rowan, and a teacher of mine at Rowan, a guy, well, he actually taught at U Arts, but he was giving me lessons, Tony Maselli. He connected us. He said, I got somebody at U Arts you should play with. And of course, as soon as I saw him, oh, hey, how you doing? I'm playing vibes now. So we played a little bit, and then he went up to William Patterson to finish his degree, and then kind of lost touch again a little bit for like a couple of years, and then he was back down in Philly, and we started playing again. And then he had brought up moving to New York and going to Purchase. He says, yeah, I'm thinking about going to grad school as well. I'm looking at Purchase. You should look into it. I said, oh, it's a good idea. And of course I did, and it seemed like a great program, and he got in, I got in, and he said, well, we could find a place together up there maybe. So then we lived up in Yonkers, and we were roommates for a couple of years. And, yeah, it was a great experience because to go up to New York by yourself just seems like a very scary thing. But to actually have somebody, we really pushed each other living together. Maybe there was somebody playing at 1 a.m. at Small that we really liked, and maybe we had been doing something all day and we were both really tired, but when you have somebody else say, all right, come on, let's get a cup of coffee and go. It's like you're pushing each other. And so we would do, push each other in that way, push each other musically, practice together, play sessions together. I think it's a great thing, to have somebody to collaborate with, not just on musical projects and doing albums, but just in that way as well. Like just somebody you could push each other.
So let me ask you this: over all of the years that you've been in New York, you played for Lincoln Center, Yoshi's, you played at Smalls. When you got there, what club for the first time that you played were you just like, wow, it kind of blew your mind?
The first place I really started playing was Smalls, and it's actually a funny story because I really kind of lucked out with timing, I think, when I got up to New York. When I got up to Purchase, my first year at grad school at Purchase, there was a pianist in the program, a guy older than me, that was finishing a master's that he had started years ago by the name of Spike Wilner. And he's the owner of Smalls now and Mesro, and just a big figure, great pianist in the New York jazz scene. And I think about halfway through the year, and I think this is about 2006 going into 2007, I think that's when he took over and became partial owner of Smalls and started changing things around, and he ended up getting a set of vibes for the club and everything. He took a liking to my playing, and he was hiring me on a lot of the gigs he was doing. So some of my first experiences playing in New York, most of them were at Smalls with his band, playing with guys like Joe Magnarelli and Ryan Kaiser and Joel Fromm and a lot of different people that he would have on it. It was a great experience, quite scary actually, but it was wonderful. I owe a lot of thanks to him for getting the vibes in the club, and because to be completely honest, I feel like vibes players ask me all the time, well, how do you start playing around town on an instrument that's hard to move around and everything? And now a couple places have the instrument, like Smalls and Fat Cat, but it's not the easiest instrument to establish yourself, the logistics of it and everything. So, to answer your question, yeah, I mean, my first experiences were mostly with Smalls, and then, from there branching out to other places because, people would start to know who I was, and so I was starting to get calls from people to play other venues. But I feel like home base for me in New York has always been Smalls, and it's one of the best rooms acoustically to play jazz, and always had such great audiences there.
So over the years, you've won awards. In 2009, you got a Betty Carter Jazz Head residency, the Generations competition in 2009. Was there an award that you won that just kind of blew you away, that just kind of threw you off guard? Not your favorite one, but just one that was like, wow, I didn't see that coming, I didn't expect it. Anything like that?
The big one would be the Generations Award, because that was it was actually a very interesting situation. I'm not really one for competition within jazz. I don't know. I don't think it's so good for the music to have a competition like that. I mean, it's just, I don't really believe in that stuff. It's not a sport. But I think it's important to do these things because you're trying to get your name out there and say you kind of go along with it. And so I just remember winning that with Ken Bowser in our co-led band. We were fortunate enough to win this competition, and we kind of went up against a group of friends of ours, which was made it a little awkward in a way, because you don't want to be in a situation like that. But they were a great band, and I just feel like it's hard to decide who gets an award in that situation. You have two great bands, and how do you decide on somebody? So lucky enough we won, and it was great for getting our names out there, I think. So, but yeah, that was one that it definitely caught me off guard, because I think we had no idea. I mean, we prepared very hard for it and took it seriously. We really wanted to win it. So it was a tough situation, though. It wasn't something we necessarily enjoyed, but happy to have.
So other than Milt and Bobby, was there any other real solid jazz influences that affected you in the way you played and the way you looked at jazz?
Well, absolutely. Too many to name, of course. I guess I had mentioned earlier that a lot of tenor players were a big influence, like Joe Henderson and Dexter Gordon, Hank Mobley. All those Blue Note albums that they did were like my introduction to jazz, and some of the stuff that I still listen to a ton to this day. But lately I've started to kind of backtrack a little bit, and I've been listening to a lot of different bebop recordings. I really love Parker, Fats Navarro, and so I've been centering on a lot of those recordings, and I get a lot of influence from them. I get a lot of influence from non-vibists, actually. Not to say there aren't other vibe players out there. That I get a lot of influence from, obviously, Milt and Bobby, but also Gary Burton, big influence, and Cal Jader, Hampton, obviously, he's a big influence. Fred Norvo, Glenn Winchester. So there's a lot of classic guys outside of Milt and Bobby. I mean, I've checked out a lot of different vibes players, but I think it's usually been about horn players for me and pianists also.
Let me whittle this list down for you. If you could go back in time and witness anybody playing live, who would you go see and where would you go?
Well, that's a tough question. I guess it just jumped in my head because I was watching it not too long ago, but there was this concert at some European jazz festival. I can't remember which one, but it was Bobby Hutcherson and Harold Land, and it was just so energetic, like this, the band they had, and I'm just watching Joe Chambers just playing and, just adding so much energy. That would be a great band to see. Milt, one of my influences would be, one of those kinds of concerts would be great to see. I also think about non-jazz related stuff. I really like Brazilian music a lot, and it's like that historic Carnegie Hall Bossa Nova concert where a lot of guys came to the States for this big night, and where Bossa Nova kind of hit America. João Gilberto and Roberto Menescal and all these great musicians. So that's a big concert. That would be interesting to see. Let's say Miles Davis was in attendance at that one, and all these jazz superstars and everything. So
yeah,
that's something that comes to mind.
Yeah, right on. So you've gone through a lot of education up to this point in your life. Who would you say has taught you the most about jazz?
That's a good question. It's very difficult to answer. I mean, I've had great teachers. I've been lucky to have great teachers show me things. But I think just from before, to be completely honest, I think it's just my collaborations with Ken Bowser. I think he's probably been the biggest influence. More so than a teacher, just because we used to trade so much information and push each other. And he had great teachers also. So, if he was wrapping up a lesson with somebody, say, this is something so-and-so showed me, or here's another thing you could do over this chord change. There was a lot of information trading when we lived together. And, but just also, collaborating on all these projects and everything. He's somebody that's really kind of pushed me the most, I think, musically.
Let me ask you this about the vibes. Tell me something that you find very cool about being a vibes player that somebody wouldn't think about when they think about the vibes. It's a very distinct sound. When people love it, they really, really love it. But as a vibes player, what's the coolest thing for you about playing the vibes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it has to do. I think the coolest thing would be just trying to find different possibilities with how the instrument works in different settings. Like, that's what I feel like I'm fascinated with most lately. This quartet that I'm working with Guitar and Vibes, I'm working with Nate Radley and Ugana Kegel on bass and Jason Tiemann on drums. And it's very intriguing to me, like the possibilities with the vibraphone and that ensemble. I like trying to figure out what to do underneath the guitar when he's soloing. What I can do as an accompanist, but also deciding when the vibes plays melodies. I mean, you can kind of trade off, and so I think that's the coolest thing about it. It's a relatively newer instrument. Like, when you look at all instruments, I mean, piano has obviously a rich history, and anybody that comes up today that plays the piano, just pretty much the book is written already, how to play it, how to utilize the instrument within an ensemble. And I just don't think those rules are as strict on the vibraphone. I feel like that the book is still being written on vibes playing because it's a relatively new instrument with relatively new techniques. And that's what I find to be the coolest thing about it, is just trying to figure out where you can fit it into different, when you're trying different instrumentation, anything. You do duets with a guitar player or duets with a piano player or trios or any combinations of instruments, all the different textures it can add. all different sounds and possibilities are what I think is the most fascinating things about playing vibes.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, kind of a general question, but it's somewhat specific. Why do you love jazz?
I don't know. I think the simplest answer is just because it feels good. It's just got a good feeling to it. Swing has a great feeling to it. When you hear something that's really in the pocket, something that's really swinging, it makes you feel a certain way. So it's a pretty general question, but I feel like that's kind of what anybody's answer should be, really. I mean, not to, but I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if I could get more specific than that, because that's what, when I think about that question, I have to think about, well, what really inspired me to get into it in the first place? What were my first experiences like hearing the music? And I just think that every time I've ever heard jazz in my life, there's always something about it that fascinated me. And I think it's that feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Everybody that you encounter has a perception of who you are. Your parents, your family, your friends, your bandmates, the crowds you play for. But tell me, who do you think you are?
Again, a hard question to answer. I wouldn't even know how to answer that. I don't really know.
Well, let's do this. Let's throw another question out here about your career and your playing. Let's say we hook up in 10 years and we talk. My very first question to you is going to be, what's been going on lately? What are you going to want to tell me has happened?
10 years from now?
Yeah, about 10 years, 10, 15 years from now, yeah.
Well, I would hope that, to be honest, I think just doing what I'm doing, like just getting to play compelling music with the people that I play with, finding different things, not necessarily things that, like I'm not out there trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. I just, try to go with the flow with music making, play with people that I really respect a lot and learn from them and just see where that takes me. And as long as I get to do those projects and be able to survive playing the music that I love to play, I think that's, would be the best situation.
The questioning is over. Thank you. I appreciate you going through my litany here of answering questions. It was great to get to know you. I'm glad my audience is going to get a chance to kind of get behind your music and see who you are. So I really appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks for interviewing. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Ben for his vibes and his tasty music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or you can always visit the neonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.